Before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know that we are talking about the tender topic of narcissism and disorders of the psyche. We know that we are not in your homes and we cannot see what is happening behind closed doors. So it's super important to us that you are safe mentally, emotionally, and physically. And we hope that you can use these tools to process not only your own emotion, but help your partner become more functional. This episode ended up being part 1 of a part 2 series. So we highly encourage you to come back and listen to next week's episode as well, because we actually fill in some of the puzzle pieces and make a bigger picture of what narcissism looks like. So go ahead, click subscribe so you can get a notification when next week's episode is live. Without further ado, let's dive in. Today, we are diving into a topic that we get so many emails, so many messages about, and that is the disorder of the psyche known as narcissism. And so we are going to be talking about how do you even get to that point? How do you help someone that is experiencing this disorder of the psyche? How do you yourself function within maybe the household or in a relationship? And what does it even mean? And how do we get to disorders of the psyches? And so welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tiara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis, who puts all of this together, and they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Yes. Hello, world.
Hi, friends.
Hello. I want to start by saying the sun is shining today.
Yes, I'm so glad you're pointing that out.
I know that we are going to hit a moment where it's like it'll get cold again. We will dip back down again. But, oh my gosh, today is just glorious.
And that's such a perfect lead in because for a lot of people, when the sun is not shining, I happen to be partnered with such a person, her psyche gets disordered. It just feels really, really sad. For me, it's not. It's actually kind of a joy point, which maybe I'm the one that's dealing with a disorder of the psyche there. I don't know. But a lot of people, when the sun's not shining, it's a real heavy, which again we label as sad, and their psyche gets disordered. It just gets, it's overwhelming. It's like, oh, I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't even want to do anything today. I have no energy because of the psyche being disordered.
Well, it is such a good lead in because I think about that if you don't know this about yourself, if you don't know how you are affected by just dreary, cloudy days, it can really set you off with your partner and vice versa. Like I think for Glenn, because he experiences actually a lot of joy, like when it's cloudy, rainy, especially, he just loves that. And for me, I am experiencing the opposite. And if we didn't have the tools that we have gained through the connection codes, it could easily be a fight.
For sure.
Like kind of, what's wrong with you?
Maybe it was a fight, but only a few thousand times. That's not that bad.
I just think about in the past, even the terminology, which I do feel guilt about, where I would say, what's wrong with you? You know, where I've judged him thinking, no, you should also be depressed that the sun has not been shining for several days. And I put a judgment on it, which is how so often we treat each other, where instead of understanding that this is my experience experience is that, I really get affected by days and days of no sunshine and cold and don't want to go outside, where for Glenn, it's kind of the opposite. He loves it. And I was talking to a girlfriend actually in the last couple of weeks, same kind of thing. She loves those days and she loves to just get on the couch and get a blanket and, watch a movie in the middle of the day. And I'm just like, oh my word, like that is... First of all, I judge that because no one should be watching a movie in the middle of the day. That's how I function, right? Like I'm like, no. We're supposed to be high task, high performing people. So no, you can't do that in the middle of the day. And yet who made me judge of that? Number one, but it's also just that we're all so different. And if we don't understand what's happening for the other kind of at the core. Like, I think for me now, I'm able to just process the sad. Yeah, I feel sad. Or just like a minute ago, you expressing all the joy about the sun shining. It's like we're all like, yes, wish we could just be doing the podcast outside because it's beautiful. It's warm today. It won't be tomorrow probably, but today it's warm and the sun is shining. So yeah, we're just so different in how we experience the simplest things as weather. So then you get into other things that we now... the whole thing we're talking about today is narcissism. And I didn't even know that term probably 2 years ago. And I feel like now everywhere I go, that is a common term.
Right.
And that is fascinating to me, how we even have terms that now people have either defined correctly or incorrectly. It's a term, and we can so easily throw it at each other or throw it at people we know. And so that is part of why we wanted to talk about all this today.
Yeah, and I want to mention too just what happens, and this is the power of the 3 phrases for me, just to find out what's happening for Phyllis, to make space for that, to figure out what I'm missing. Now I'm missing it because she hasn't told me yet, and she's going to tell me in the next 30 seconds, whatever. But to understand that, okay, something's happening for her that's not happening for me. That does not make her bad or wrong or stupid or evil or a loser or a failure. But it helps so much for me to know because, again, probably thousands of times, she would be experiencing what she was experiencing. I didn't know that's what she was experiencing, so I start filling in the blanks, and I assume that she's, again, filling the blanks. She's mad at me. She's disappointed that she married me. She wishes she'd married Bob Mills from high school, or I remember his name.
Yes,
wow. Should we block that name out from this? Hello, Bob.
There's so many Bob Mills in the world. Surely, it's really not. But so again, I'm filling in the blanks, and I'm like, wow, she's really annoyed with me. She doesn't like me. She's bummed that her life is stuck with me. Well, none of that's happening. It literally is just that the sun is not shining. Well, I didn't know that about her. And now she's able to literally, and we do that. I'll go, oh, babe, what's happening? And she'll go, oh, just some sadness. I'm like, oh, what's happening with sad? What am I missing here? She's like, well, the sun's not shining. And again, that literally is a 20-second interaction. And now we've bonded through that. And this is one of my new things I've started noticing. Now the negative becomes a positive. Now the detriment becomes a benefit. And now we're more connected, and she receives energy from me because we're co-regulating. I forget his name, the researcher, but he calls it, we're bioenergetic resources for each other. So now I'm actually strengthening her, empowering her, and she literally feels less sadness, less burden from the sun not shining. It's just amazing, the dynamic of it all, just how we function as humans whenever we're in connection, community, co-regulating. A lot of power in that.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's super powerful to talk about. I'm so glad that y'all started there and thinking about this specific disorder of the psyche. Narcissism tends to be like what everyone is being educated on right now. That, and I see a lot on ADHD right now. And so I want to first say what this is even defined as. Just for people, because, Phyllis, you said, I didn't even know what this was until 2 years ago. And so while we may have a lot of listeners that are like, oh, I may have been someone who wrote in about this, someone else may be like, what is a narcissist to begin with? Which we'll go into deeper after I say this. But it's essentially someone who is thinking very highly of oneself, needing admiration, and believing others are inferior and lacking empathy for others. And so in relationship with someone who has narcissistic tendencies, you may feel like they don't have empathy for what you're experiencing, or they think that they're better than you, you're inferior to them. So you may always just feel like whatever you're doing is never right or never enough. And so I want to talk about there's multiple layers to this, but first, how do we even get to that point? Because we talk often, you don't wake up as you're not born a narcissist. So what are some things that people could experience? How do people get to that?
Yeah. Well, and even backing up a little more, just as far as the macro, and, I talk a lot about the fact that I don't pathologize humans.
But first, say what that means.
Right. Well, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, is what in the psychology field but it's about a 1,200 page book that basically pathologizes humans. There are some good things in it. I think the original intention of it was good, but we label people and we say, oh, well, that person is whatever, ADHD or OCD or a narcissist or a psychopath or whatever. And so now they're just that. And of course, my question is always, so what do we do with them? Just throw them out in the pasture or shoot them? Or what do we do now? So instead, and everybody that's listened to this much knows I deal with a number of psychological disorders personally. So, but I don't want to just be thrown out and just labeled. And now, I don't know, I need to be put in an institution or just gotten rid of because I'm a blank. And this was incredibly difficult for Phyllis for so many years because she didn't know that, oh, okay, that's just what's happening for him. So when we pathologize humans, we go, oh, he's a narcissist. Well, I want to ask, number one, okay, well, now what do we do? And maybe even that's number two. Number one is, well, wait, what happened before that? What led to that? I deal with a very high level of OCD. Well, what led to that? What happens for me in that now? And I'm 61. I'm not counting on a big shift in my life, but I'm very, very functional. But it's not that I've been fixed or cured or healed. I still deal with this literally every day. I mean, it affects me every day. But I'm very functional, and Phyllis knows how to dance with that beautifully, and she's aware that this is just what happens for him. So she doesn't have to pathologize me. She doesn't have to label me. She doesn't have to go, oh, well, he's damaged. He's, a subhuman. No, this is what makes up Glenn. This is just what makes Glenn, one of many, many things. And she deals with disorders of the psyche herself. We all do, I'm convinced of that. And that's another big thing, too, is that we have categorized, quote unquote, psychological disorders for so long that people say, she is or she isn't. He is or he is. She's bipolar and she's not. But to realize, oh, no, these exist on a spectrum. Everybody deals with disorders of the psyche regularly. I used to say at some point in their life, I think it's all the time. Because it's simply a disorder of the psyche. The nervous system gets dysregulated, maybe because that painting falls off the wall. And so now your psyche is disordered. Now, it's probably not going to last very long, but if your life consists of falling paintings a lot, which many people's lives do, their psyche gets completely whacked out, and we don't have to label them and say, well, that Tira, she's just a blank, and so, we can't really deal with her. Right.
And you had mentioned this, but oftentimes it's your experiences in your childhood or at some point in your life that lead to your psyche being disordered. And so I love this quote by Brene Brown. She talks about all types of the emotional and disorders of the psyche. And she said that narcissism is actually driven by the opposite of what it appears to be.
Yes.
So oftentimes someone that appears to be narcissist has no empathy. It feels like they're better than you. They're just overcompensating for their own unprocessed shame. And so often our disorders are coming from an unprocessed emotion. The disorder of the psyche known as anxiety, unprocessed fear leads to high levels of anxiety. And so the same is true for narcissism. It's easy for us to walk into a room and judge that person, label them, and just walk away from them, which we validate that there's pain experiences there. But to not have the empathy to understand that they have unprocessed shame firing within their body, usually from an occurrence that happened early in their life that has now led them to this moment. And that is now being spoken out about so many disorders. I was watching Dr. Gaber yesterday, who's talking about ADHD. And I have a son that's been diagnosed with ADHD. And he said that it's often there was something in their childhood that they were needing than they weren't receiving. And as a parent, it's just like so difficult because it's easy for me to just blame myself. What did I do wrong with this child to lead him to this moment? But I'd have to give myself the grace to know, like, he probably didn't even know what he needed, And so, but there was something that has triggered this within his body that now we can work on, we can regulate, we can do occupational therapy for, we can do these things for, and it's not going to define him. We obviously do the core emotion wheel, and he is so much more functional now than he was 2 years ago since he is processing the emotions. And so the same is true for narcissism.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of my dreams, and that I see happening with couples that we sit with, is I want them to get excited about psychological disorders. I want them to go, oh, so that's what happens for me. Well, I'll be darned. That makes sense. That's the reason I'm at odds with her all the time, because I'm trying to get the light switches in the correct position, correct, quote unquote, and she doesn't care about the light switches. And again, this is literal. We had so many conflicts, so much struggle because Phyllis wouldn't do things right. I hope you hear the quotation marks there. And I did things right. Well, we had no idea that, oh, no. Glenn experiences pain if the light switches are not correct. I was making fun of you earlier because you have your light switches in the wrong position in your house. And I'm like, how do you live here? This is just unbearable. Well, Tira's unable to feel pain about that. And it's not because she's dumb or wrong or bad, but it's also not because I'm dumb or wrong or bad. That's just what happens for me. I'm not trying. I don't look at those light switches and try to feel pain. I just do. And when I was sitting in your living room, I'm like, oh my gosh, so I was looking at those light switches. And it feels, no, I don't have to jump out the window, but it is a pain experience. That does not mean that Tira needs to do anything about it. And I said it to her in the moment. I said, ooh, sad. That's a pain experience for me. And she's like, huh. And again, we're very close. So and this is why we use the phrase, she doesn't care. She cares about me, but it's just, you're like, well, whatever. That's just what's happening, for Glenn in the moment. And that's another big thing, if we can get to that, where Phyllis is able to be aware that that's just what Glenn experiences. And I don't have to do anything differently. I think we talked once about lining up the straw in our Yeti cups. Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah, it was last week's episode.
Yeah. So she doesn't have to do that. And I would suggest she's not allowed to do that. She is not allowed to start trying to run around ahead of me, quote unquote, fixing everything because of my experience. Which is what she did for many years, and it was exhausting.
Well, and I think that's the unhealthy part of all of this is when, we married 40 years ago, and neither of us understood psychological disorders. Neither of us understood specifically obsessive compulsive disorder, didn't know that Glenn had dealt with it at high levels. And so the patterns that he had and the systems that he had made total sense to him. They didn't to me. They were not organic within me. But I was, the good girl. I was didn't have a voice because that was how I was raised.
Right.
So I go into marriage and it's like, oh, this is, for Glenn, it was the right way. Like it only made sense to him. Like why? Like to him, it was very much, if you do the towels in a certain order, they look better. It's not that they dry you better.
Right.
It's just more about they fit in the cabinet better. They look better. And so for him, it was just, that is the right way to do it. And
which is a joy experience. This is why we say emotion's not good, bad, right, wrong. Joy can be incredibly detrimental. So, for me, I'm spending, no, I interrupted you, sorry, but literally I'm spending 20 minutes getting these towels perfectly stacked. And Phyllis is thinking, we got a few more things to get done here. I'm like, no. Our task of the day is getting the towels perfectly folded, perfectly stacked, and now we can celebrate the towels. And Phyllis is going, who cares? It doesn't matter. They're just towels. Whereas it literally is an emotional bonding for me with the towels that I know they appreciate me taking care of them so beautifully. It sounds weird when I say it out loud.
You're mentioning it as a joy experience. But the flip side is there was a real pain experience when the systems weren't right and then when there wasn't certain order. And so then I was the unhealthy part was that I started making that my world was, you got to do it all so there's no pain for him. You got to do it all right. Because if you don't do it all right, then we have a fight.
Yeah.
And so then in time, it's like I started creating a world where I felt responsible for what was happening for him. And so then I started trying to incorporate all of his patterns, but for me, it was never organic. So
Yeah.
it was like a task that had to be done every day. And, you know, of course, fast forward many years, we learned what all this was. And it was so freeing because then it was like, oh, okay, wow, that now made sense. Where at times I thought that I was just going crazy because I couldn't seem to get things right.
Right.
Because there was definitely a right and a wrong, and I was always landing on the wrong because I organically never could get there. Like I could just, his patterns just never flowed automatically for me. And so, you know, especially as we started having more children, it got all the more complicated because I was also trying to keep them in line to make sure that Dad's not experiencing any pain here. And so, you know, for those listeners, if you're in a relationship now, you could be the one where you're identifying, oh, I've got some psychological disorders at a pretty high number. Because again, like Glenn says, we all, our psyche gets disordered. I mean, we just do, like in different ways. And I would love, of course, for us just to realize that if we were being taught really wonderful emotional health at a young age, we would be going through life knowing so much of how to recognize things that we're going through, recognize what other people are going through. And a lot of times, like even the idea of how to human well, it comes from the knowledge of understanding what other people are going through. Because that is where empathy comes from. It's just understanding instead of judgment, instead of judging, well, he's just crazy, or, you know, well, he's just unkind, or he's just a bully, instead of realizing, well, what's behind that? What's pushing that? What's motivating that?
Yeah, and that's a big push for me in my lifetime. I hope we can shift this culturally, that the pathological, the pathologizing a human usually is the end of the paragraph. Like literally people go, he's a narcissist. Oh. Well, when they say that to me, I'm like, oh, what do you think happens for him there? That's the beginning of the conversation. Whereas by pathologizing humans, that's the end of it. It's like, oh, he's ADHD. Oh, okay. And then we've labeled him and now we're all set. Well, wait, ADHD. So what happens?
We label them and then we give them medicine and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to get people throwing stuff at us, but
sorry,
that is a big thing in our culture. It's just like, that's the end of the paragraph, give them a med, or put them in an institution. And I love, one of my favorite things to do is getting to sit with someone who deals with a decent level of schizophrenia, number one, because I do too, so it's very valuable to me to see. But to understand, these are just humans that are experiencing stuff. And I'm eager to find out, and I'm eager to help them find out. So what happens for you there? Help me get that. And they've usually never had anybody do that. People just pathologize them and go, oh, well, you're a schizophrenic. That's the end of the discussion.
Well, and there is, I mean, I know you just touched on the topic. So as far as how
we'll blame Tara for it.
Yeah, how we as a society have come up with some really quick fixes.
Yep.
And even you mentioned schizophrenia, if you know, and you don't have episodes very often, but if I didn't know what was happening with you in those moments, and I called 911, they would come and take him away, and then he would go somewhere that would probably actually push him into a much deeper well, a much deeper place, and it might actually take him much longer to come through the episode. Where when I can just sit with him and not panic or freak out myself and just know what he really needs right now is just for me to be nearby and to listen to what is happening and to use the tools to make space for it. And then I usually have learned to just ask questions. And then at some point, I do bring reality into it. To remind him of reality, as in, well, you weren't there at that time. You were with me at that time. Like I bring it back into a reality. But I've known other people who don't know what to do. They call 911 and their partner is taken away and put somewhere where then often it takes a bit to get them out.
I do want to point out, do you feel safe in those moments?
Do I feel safe with Glenn in those moments?
Yes, because for someone who feels unsafe, 911 feels like the only option.
Sure.
And so but that is why we talk a lot, and actually not a lot. We, the three of us, talk a lot about this. We want to talk to y'all more about this, but so often people are only getting help when they're in a moment of distress. So often. And so that is a moment that person is dysregulated.
Right.
And they are having an episode, whatever realm that it's in. Like I can look at my son when he's having an ADHD episode and I can just see it. If I try to teach him in that moment how he's supposed to be a human,
which is what most
quote
people
unquote,
do.
Then it's not getting him anywhere. It was me working with him, having someone come every Tuesday, every Thursday to help get his brain attached to each other, which is a privilege that I had the finances to be able to do that, and I recognize that. But when he was regulated, teaching him these things. And so often we mess ourselves up because we're only getting therapy when we're in crisis. We're only reaching out for help when we're in crisis. But we all know that when we're flooded, we become dumber versions of ourselves. So you and Glenn were doing the work in between episodes.
Right.
And so doing that work in between gave you then the safety, I'm assuming, for those moments where, he's not about to kill me. Like he's not about to throw me into a wall.
I never felt unsafe.
Because he's done enough work on himself where he can where he's a safe person.
Yeah. I mean, I always have felt safe and I had no fear of him physically doing anything. I mean, it was just more that the psyche, that it wasn't speaking truth. It was what he was experiencing, but I knew this wasn't really real. But I didn't feel unsafe. But it is interesting in just what you're just now saying, as far as really getting yourself help. And I go back to just the needing sunshine, which now I think call it SAD. What's the term? What is
Winter
it?
depression is what seasonal depression.
Seasonal adjustment disorder.
Seasonal adjustment deodorant.
Yeah, that's deodorant stuff.
Not deodorant. But it's like, okay. And Echo and I, our oldest daughter, we've been talking about this because she's really has this same experience, similar to, and that I've been more aware of. And what's interesting is I wouldn't say that I was aware of it at all 10 years ago. So I have some ideas as to why this has changed for me, but she was talking about it. And so we're already talking about next January. We'll spend a week at the beach to get the sunshine, to get the warmth that we don't have here often in January. And it's like, oh, so we are already being proactive for next January. And then, what's interesting is the last few Januaries prior to this year, we would go away. We often went somewhere like Miami, where we kind of knew that's going to be warm and it's going to be sunny. And this year, we had a different focus, and we were pretty much intentional not to go anywhere in January. And I'm like, ooh, that was probably a mistake. I really needed that week at the beach this January. So it's like when you recognize these things about yourself, you go, this is really important for me. So I'm going to go ahead now, February, going ahead and plan a next January, because that's how you become proactive. But if you don't know that you're even affected by things, if you don't know what your disorder of the psyche is, it's really hard to get help. And then then you get a crisis. There were moments this January where I was like, ooh, this feels dark.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I want to get out of bed. Well, if you don't know what's happening for you and you don't know how to really tune into that, you definitely aren't being proactive. And then sometimes you're just going and assuming something, and then actually what help you're getting is a really short-term fix that really doesn't give you the life, the fullness, the freedom that you want to have.
Right. And I'm thinking also about, you're saying, which is so true, if you can tune into yourself, but a lot of the issue with narcissism, from what I have read and heard people talk about in my experiences with people, is that oftentimes because they come across as being better than, I don't need help, And I have someone in my life where I've even given them the connection codes book, and I'm like, you need this. And they're like, oh, I read it. It doesn't apply to me. I don't need that. Like I am such this higher level of living that I don't need any help. And so if you're in a relationship with someone like that doesn't recognize it in themselves and that's not willing to get help, then what do those people do?
For years, for Phyllis and me, and one time ever, but I heard it 1,000 times from her, she said, you need therapy, which did not help any. And that's what we tend to do, is just to say to somebody, oh, well, you're a blank, well, you're psychotic, you're bipolar, you're, a narcissist. As far as I know, that never has and never will connect anybody. So it is tricky. This is one of the many reasons that I am such an advocate against psychological isolation. When people are living in isolation, and this can be any entity, it can be an individual, it can be a couple, it can be a family, a business, a church, a community, whatever. If you don't have outside people helping you, you're probably doomed. And the sad thing is, in our culture, is we kind of don't let anybody in. And I'm not saying you need to talk with your deepest, darkest secrets to the stranger at Walmart. But if you don't have a few people, and I mean a few, not 10, but 3 or 4 in your life that know you, that see you, that know. And my dream is that literally couples can go out to dinner and just say to each other, so what disorders of the psyche do you deal with? Like, where do you get knocked off course? Where do you, where does your psyche get messed up? And they go, well, for me, like yesterday morning. And it's just a time. And this, again, is the whole pathologizing thing, that is not some big dun, dun, dun. You have to go to a therapist, a total stranger, which I'm a therapist. I'm not against that. But I don't want people to just have that. I want them to also have close teamship relationships where they can just talk about it. So for a lot of people, we'll just pick, the wife will not be the one who can convey to her partner what's happening with him.
Okay.
She will need.
Will you say that again?
Yeah. The wife will not be able to convey to her partner what's happening for him. She can see it. It's very obvious to her. And she will not be able to be the voice. Should she be able to? I don't know. If we're voting, I'll vote for that. But she may not be able to. And 30 years ago, I was always bothered by that. Today, I celebrate it. That there are people that can say things to Phyllis that I could say it 8 times and she wouldn't get it. They say it once and Phyllis is like, oh, this is so exciting, so much joy. This person told me this. And I'm like, hello, I told you that like 8 times in the last 3 weeks. I'm thrilled with that now, because I know that I'm not God, and I'm not a complete person, and there are things that she can just hear better from Tira than she hears them from me. That's just welcome to planet Earth. That's the way it is. So if we are not living in isolation, of course, the problem is the vast majority of people are living in isolation. They have no one outside of themselves, even people that are really, really involved in ministries and, whatever. And they think, oh, no, I'm involved with all. Yeah, but nobody knows you. Nobody knows what's happening with you. We sat with a couple a few weeks ago, and we just adore them, and they adore us. They're so kind to us, and they're connection coders, and we taught them the connection codes. And Phyllis and I were processing through with them a couple things that were happening with us, and they were connection codes extraordinary. It was beautiful and amazing. And I used some choice language with him, which was very identity bringing to him. But I was just startled at how good he was at doing this. I can hear from him better, more efficiently, some of those things than I can hear from Phyllis. Should I be able to hear it equally well from Phyllis? I don't know. I guess I'm not sure. But when he said the things that resonated with me, I don't like to say perfect, but pretty close to perfectly. When Phyllis says the same thing, it doesn't connect as well. It doesn't make quite as much sense to me. So all of us need other people in our lives, and especially when you're dealing with a high level of something, whether it's narcissism or whatever, that another person can go, hey, I think something might be happening with you there. Help me get that. What happens for you? Because I feel like I might be missing something.
Without labeling them.
Right. Absolutely.
Because as soon as you put the label, then you've lost them.
I've never met the person that likes the label. There may be some out there. I've never met them.
Well, a minute ago you were saying, which Tira asked you to repeat, is that there's times we can't hear it from our partner. And part of it is because there's a whole lot of pain that has occurred in that relationship.
There we are. Yep.
And so sometimes it's that friend that you can hear things from and you can process with, because there hasn't been all that pain. And so, if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, this is good information, but I don't know that my partner is safe to say that in bed before I get out of bed, is to realize we get that. Like when Glenn was a bigger pain source in my life than anyone else, then it would have been really hard for me to first thing in the morning to have said, sad, sad, sad. The sun isn't shining. And part of it is, the way in the past, pre-connection codes, there was response, there was judgment, and on both sides, kind of like, what's wrong with you? Who cares that the sun's not shining? You got a lot to do today, and we got a lot to do, and you got a lot to be thankful for, and, get up and read your Bible and you'll be fine.
Yeah, because I could see that playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, those patterns of the past, the pain of the past, will come up and be that, ooh, not sure I can say that in this place. And so that may be where you are right now, where you're thinking, I want to be able to have that. And we have said this many times in the podcast and in other settings is, you got to find those safe people. You've got to find one safe person who will just make space for your sad and not try to fix you, not judge you, not correct you, but just listen to that.
Yeah.
And
what stuns me about that is how quickly it actually then processes. Because what we hear so much, especially from faith-based people, and I did this thousands of times with Phyllis, where that would be what was happening. I'm like, babe, focus on the positive. I mean, God is in control. God is for us. We're going to be fine. Just be happy. And now I've reactivated the emotion, so it's going to last not for 19 seconds, but for maybe 19 hours, 19 days, who knows. And she's not going to turn to me next time. She's just going to, try to squelch it, ignore it, whatever. So when I make safe space, it literally processes in 20 seconds. And now we're rolling, which is amazing to me. I don't know, I think this is the most counterintuitive part of the connection codes, because when she says she's sad, it just feels like what I should do is slap her on the back, hug her, shake her, something, and get her to not be sad. But in reality, if I just go, oh, dang, ooh, wow, that's a lot. So help me get that. What happens for you there? What all am I missing? And then she processes the emotion. And again, I'm not saying that it will eliminate it all, but literally 30 seconds later, she is in a different place, a different level, if you will, of sadness.
Well, I would think, though, for someone who's in a partnership with someone experiencing narcissism, they feel like they can't say sad because their partner doesn't have the empathy to give them. And so now when we're talking about these people that are in these partnerships, this person has now been closed up for years because they can't convey their emotion to their partner. So we have people asking us, like, how do I do this? I can't convey to them. They have no empathy for me. They're either telling me how I'm wrong or quoting Bible verses or, just telling me to get over it. And so they're not emotionally safe there. And they don't know how to continue going down this path.
Right.
Like, how do I keep doing this?
Well, that's a great question. And again, you'll need outside help. I'm not saying necessarily a paid professional. You can certainly contact us. We'd be honored to help in those situations. But what the partner of the narcissist doesn't realize is that the narcissist has all this unprocessed emotion. And he or she, a much higher level of males than females typically, he has not processed his emotions. That it's just like if somebody drags in from the desert and they're dying of thirst and somebody offers them a drink of water, they don't look around the room first and see if anybody else wants a drink of water. They're dying of thirst. They're just desperate and overwhelmed, and they're just trying to get a drink. It doesn't even occur to them, well, there might be somebody else in the room that's thirsty. So this person, again, dealing with narcissism, is so dammed up
Yep.
Emotionally, they have zero capacity, which again looks horrible. Because then we look at that person, we're like, that's just a cold-hearted, narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, whatever, not realizing that, there's something that happened before that led them to that. Because that's a non-human. If you watch little kids, you watch a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, you'll see another little kid start to cry, and frequently this one will start crying. It's like, wait, this little guy is the one that got hurt, and he's crying. They just automatically, they can't help themselves. It's coded within us. You walk out of a store, you see somebody's falling down on the ground, and they hit their head on something, they're bleeding. It is coded within us just to go, oh my gosh, what happened? And we tend to them because we see their vulnerability. We see their need. Unless I am so damned up already, then, I can't even be aware of another.
And I would say someone who deals with high levels of narcissism probably functions damned up on a continual basis.
We don't like saying 100%, but yeah.
Okay. And so one more question before we wrap up that someone specifically asked is, can someone be, they use the word healed.
Sure.
Can someone be healed from narcissism?
I don't know how to answer the question. Because I would want to say no, but I don't mean it the way it sounds like I mean no. I think they can become functional. I'm 61. I'm never going to be quote unquote healed of all the stuff that I deal with, and I don't care anymore. I'm very, very functional. I know how to process through. So what that would mean, and just for the record, I've sat with tons of couples where one of them was diagnosed specifically by a psychiatrist or a psychologist as a narcissist. And literally, I sit, and I'm fairly good at what I do. I sit with them, sit in my office, and I go, so help me get what happens for you. It's amazing to me. I have never, and I don't like to say never, I've never sat with anyone who doesn't immediately go into their experience, what's happening with them. And they've never had anybody do that with them before. So, because they've just always been labeled, he's a narcissist, so they move away from them, which I get. It's difficult to deal with somebody that struggles with, whatever it is, sociopathy. But to just find out what's happening for the person. So can they be healed? Can they be cured? They can become functional. Will they ever be as functional as Phyllis is in this regard? I don't know. I never will be. There's lots of areas of my life that I'll never be on the level that she is. She's very, very stable, functional in so many areas. And I would suggest in just the last few years, we've discovered this. There are things that she experiences that I don't experience at all. I'm thinking, wait, so the sun's not shining. Who cares? What difference does it make? How can that possibly affect your day? The day's the same. Well, it ain't for her. It's a different experience for her. So can she be healed of that? Can she be fixed? Well, first of all, we don't care. We're not trying to heal her or fix her. Second of all, can she become more functional? Yes, by processing through what's happening with her in the moment.
Yeah.
How's that for a non-answer?
No, I think it was an answer.
Okay.
What I want our listeners now to take away from this is if you are in relationship with someone who is exhibiting narcissistic behaviors, step one is don't label them. Don't come to them and give them a label, because all that will do is drive them further away from you and disorder their psyche even deeper. Two, recognize that you may not be the person that can help them. They will not hear from you in the same way they will hear from a friend, a member of your community. And when I say community, I don't mean like stranger in your neighborhood, someone you live life with, or a therapist. And it would be a situation of like, hey, let's do this together. Not you need therapy, but let's go and do this together. We together could be better. Three, that you can become more functional, and that is through processing emotion over and over again. And if there's high levels of narcissism, that means there is a dam inside of them that needs to be broken. And if that is the case, you need help, because holding on for dear life, you can't do that alone. And so reach out to someone, know that you're not alone, And then also we did talk about the safety aspect. It's always so important for me to see people because we don't know what's happening in your home. And if you are in an unsafe environment, it is not your job to heal someone. Right. It is not your job to live life at a level that is unsafe for you. And so we implore you to take care of yourself and to get help. And that's why having a friend that you can reach out to process your own emotion with is so important.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that I want people to get pissed off about this stuff earlier. I sat with a couple this week. We did an intake. I asked her, I said, and they're actually separated because she finally left him. And so I said, so help me get that. How long has this been happening for the two of you? And she instantly said 19 years.
Wow.
And I have good rapport with my people, so this sounds horrible. But I said, wait, what's happening for you? It took you 19 years to figure this out. What's happening for you that you didn't figure this out after 3 weeks? You're a smart woman. I can tell already. You're a smart person. And it took you 19 years. And she said, well, I was trying to be strong. And I said, that's your working definition of strong? She goes, well, that's what everybody told me. That's what my mom told me. That's what my pastor told me, that is strength. I'm like, that's not strength. And again, I have good rapport. I said, that's just dumb. There's no way that this should have gone on for 19 years. Are you kidding me? So now, my point is not that she leaves him and she never speaks to him again. My point is, whatever, 3 days, 3 weeks in, everybody can have a crappy day. I mean, Phyllis is just worst day of her life. She has a wretched afternoon and she treats me very poorly. That happens for everybody. But if that's ongoing for days and weeks, change something. Again, I'm not saying I need to leave her. I just need to go, oh, hello, no circulation here. We're going to talk to 3 people that we trust, 3 close people, and figure this thing out. And I actually made a vow, this is in the early 90s, and as far as I know, I've always kept this, that when Phyllis and I had a conflict, this was a big thing for me back then because we were always disconnected. But whenever Phyllis and I had a conflict, I was going to talk to the next person I saw about it. And I don't mean a total stranger at Walmart, but the next person I saw. And I very quickly, this is one of the corollaries of it that was painful but good, I very quickly found out who cared about me. Because somebody would say, hey, how you doing? And I literally would go, oh, not good. Phyllis and I are at odds, and and they would be like, oh, okay, well, and they're done with the conversation. I'm like, note to self, don't turn to that person. And then I found out people that actually were very kind and caring and did tune in to me that I wouldn't have thought that those could actually be my friends. So anyway, I just want people to get out of this. I want to mention too, just because I didn't hear you specifically saying that, but find out what's happening. Again, I really, really encourage getting outside help. But in the moment, instead of going, oh, well, he's just a narcissist, just goes, babe, help me get that. I feel like I'm missing something there. And I always frame it that way. I think I'm missing something there. What just happened? Because I think I missed that. Could you help me catch up, help me get that? And you're just inviting them into their own experience. And I see relationships all the time where that's big, big breakthrough that he's never had, at least felt. I'm not blaming her. But he's never felt the invitation, the safety to convey what's happening for him. And that opens up a whole new realm for them.
Awesome. Okay, do y'all want to go into the wheel?
Yep.
Okay, so now we are going to go into our core emotion wheel, which is what we end every episode doing. And this is the wheel that helps you to identify your emotions within yourself. So we talked a lot about being blocked up today with shame, sad, or fear. By identifying these emotions in the moment, it helps you from getting blocked in the future. And so while we can't change what's happened in the past, we can process it. We can change what we're doing in our day-to-day moving forward from here. Yeah. And identifying in the moment is one of those things that can help us.
Yeah. So can we do an issue-specific wheel about learning ourselves as individuals and how our psyche gets disordered?
You go first then.
Okay.
Show me what that means.
Yeah. So for me, there's tons of joy that I've been able to just be seen by you and heard, and that you're curious and that you're fascinated by this extremely odd person that you live with and that you're entertained by that.
get that.
Lots of shame, both currently when I really get knocked off course, but just thinking, oh my gosh,
Wow.
literally decades that I missed this so badly. We missed it so badly, and all the pain and struggle that came from that.
Wow.
Guilt over that too. Just like, dang it, this girl didn't deserve that. She deserved peace, and which is what you married me for. You thought this was just going to be fun, and just a few decades later, we actually got to fun. Lots of pain, so much. There's hurt, both just in the experiences that I've had, but also from how people have treated me. We talk about that often, just the rejection from so many people, and that's shifted drastically the last few years of our lives, but most of my, at least adult life, and probably childhood too. I was just wounded continuously with people that couldn't be kind to me. And I know they were having stuff happening for them too, but sadness in that, both for me, for us, but then for society. It's like, oh my gosh, could we please just be present? I love Carlos Whitaker's How to Human. Let's just hear each other. Let's just hear what's happening. May not make sense to me, but so, I want to see that shifting in our society. Lots of loneliness. Oh my gosh. So many things over the years. I was able to share with you some, but really didn't have any other safe people to share just what was happening for me. A good bit of fear. Even now, I have no idea who's listening to this, and I imagine there's at least one person out there who judges and says, oh, well, if he would just, turn to the Lord better or whatever, so there's fear of judgment in that. I'm up to 8. I lost count. Oh, anger. Ooh, lots of anger. Yeah, just that, man, we have missed on this so horribly. And I've done it too. I mean, it's not that, I was certainly the victim of that many, many times, but I was also the perpetrator of that many, many times, rolling my eyes and going, oh, well, he's a narcissist. Oh, well, she's bipolar. And not even seeing the human in it, but simply seeing the label.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Well, I'll start with anger. Feel a lot of anger of how this has affected me, our life, just the kind of the disorder of the psyche. And I wish I had, even now recently, like that I could see what's going on in your head, because the way you're reacting is not making any sense. But I love it when I can say what's happening with you and push in to really get what's actually happening, because what's happening on my side does not match what's happening on your side. Yeah. Feel fear that listeners, that this will not be helpful, or this will actually have some fear even about my comment of dialing 911. Like if you are doing that, I'm not judging that. For me, it was just being able to sit with you the last time was really beautiful. And I, didn't see or didn't need to call for help. I was just able to sit with you. Definitely just joy in my immediate thought for joy was joy in the sunshine, joy in traveling with you this weekend, joy in having tools to navigate the psychological disorders that you deal with and I deal with, but having tools that have really saved us. Yeah. In the pain region, I would say lonely, many years of lonely over just not knowing who to talk to, not knowing how to even explain what we were going through. Felt a lot of loneliness in those early days, early years. And hurt for sure by your reactions to me. Even just recently, I think when we were trying to put together a PowerPoint and I mentioned a picture, because I didn't really understand what was happening for you. And so I get at times just the reaction from you, and that was really hurtful. Sad that we've missed each other on this so much. That's such a big part of our story, which is a beautiful thing, and how we can help others with our story, but sad that we had to journey through so much alone. I mean, not having people that understood, not having people that walked beside us in that. Let's see, lonely, sad, hurt. I think, guilt and shame. Definitely the guilt for me would be how, I didn't early on want to read about it. I didn't early on want to learn about psychological disorders. I didn't want to learn anything. Shame in that too, that I don't know. I never leaned in, and I didn't want to learn how to function better in this. I just wanted it to go away. So yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
Thank you both for sharing, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, because I know that it's hard to open ourselves up and be like, this is who we are, to the world, and we don't know who's listening. And, but I know that for me, and I hope for our listeners, like that our biggest takeaway today is not even what to do, other than just like having empathy for each other. And that doesn't mean that we have to live life like we have people in our lives that deal with psychological disorders and they've chosen to not have a relationship with Wes and I, but I have empathy for them. And I can now see them instead of a villain in my story. I can see them as this whole person that is in a lot of pain. And I can know that if they ever come back into my life, now I have tools to approach it differently. And so I think that is what we are missing in society today, which is ironic because narcissistic tendencies are the opposite of that. And so for the rest of us, like having empathy and seeing and asking what is happening for each other, I believe can help it further this progress for everyone. And so thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or any areas that you're getting stuck, please feel free to reach out. You can send us an email. I'll link that in the show notes. But we love getting emails from you and either how the episodes have affected you, what stood out, or also like, hey, can you do a podcast about this topic, whatever it is. Hopefully you've listened enough now to know that really no topics are off limits. Like we talk about everything. And we're just so glad you are here. And also share this episode, share Connection Codes Podcast with 3 people today. Choose 3 of your friends that you're in community with. You're like, I want to go deeper with you in life. And I want to process and I want to know what's happening for you in life. Share this episode with them today. If you are finding yourself in a relationship and you're like, I am trying and we are hitting walls and we need help, then you can book a session with Dr. Glenn on his website, and I will link that also in the show notes, because you don't have to do this alone. Right. We weren't meant to do this alone.
Yes.
And you can just do a few sessions and it may break through everything. It may change everything about how you're viewing yourself, because these codes are as much for ourselves, if not more for ourselves, than for our relationships. So book a session through the link below. And we do this all because...
So let them know that you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.
Let's do this.